Thanks again very much for being here. My name's Grant Olson. I'm the Public Programs Manager, and I've been doing these webinars for a while now, but we have Toby Kane here.
Howdy, my name's Toby Kane. I'm the new Education Assistant here at Seed Savers, and I'm going to be helping Grant out with this webinar and hopefully a few more webinars in the future. So, hello.
Yeah, you'll be hearing a lot more from Toby and probably less from me this year. We've got some great webinars for the rest of the summer and into the fall. We're going to talk specifically about saving seeds from flowers tonight. I'll let Toby kind of take over for a little bit here.
Yeah, sure thing. So if you logged into this webinar, you're probably familiar with the mission of Seed Savers. Our mission is to save North America's diverse but endangered garden heritage for future generations by building a network of people like yourselves who are committed to collecting, conserving, and sharing heirloom seeds and plants and flowers while educating people about the value of genetic and cultural diversity. Some of you might be asking, since you came to this webinar, why should I save seeds from flowers? A great gardener, Ira Wallace, came to Seed Savers last summer and gave a presentation on this very topic, and we took a lot of our reasons from her presentation. She said that you should save seeds from flowers to save money. Although buying seed is much cheaper than buying transplants or mature plants, saving seeds is free, and so what could be better than that? Saving seeds can help you become more self-sufficient. It allows you to have more pride and ownership of your garden. When you save seeds from your own flowers, you are saving seeds that are adapted to your location. They have adapted to your local climate, the soil that they're growing in, and they have proven that they can withstand the pests in your area. Saving your own seeds allows you to share them and swap them with your friends and family. This, creates a sense of community, and that's a really good thing. Also, when you save seeds from your own flowers, you're helping to maintain biodiversity, not only of different plant species, but also you're helping the biodiversity of pollinators and other insects. And then finally, saving flower seeds can help you preserve a living memory. As you might know, Diane Otwheely started this organization to save flower seeds, to save her grandfather's morning glories. And so, by saving that seed, she saved a lot of memories of her childhood, of her family. And, if you save seeds from a flower that is important to you, is important to a friend, or important to just a special place or garden that you visited, it's a really neat artifact that you can just keep maintaining in your garden year after year. So those are a lot of reasons to save flower seeds, and if you folks have your own reasons, feel free to share those with everybody else here. All right, so we grow a lot of seeds here at the Heritage Farm. This is a photograph of Diane's garden from last year. These are some bachelor's buttons, those bright blue flowers in the middle. And Diane has well over 200 plants in her garden, just kind of a lot of perennial flowers and self-seeding annuals, but she also plants seeds every year. And so we have a list coming up of some seeds that Diane grows in her garden and some seeds that would be really easy for you to save in the upcoming season. So if you want to take a look at this list throughout the rest of the presentation, you'll notice a lot of these. We'll have some poppies in the presentation. Gosh, what else, Grant, is there? I think there are some marigolds in the rest of the presentation, maybe some nasturtiums or sunflowers. So we'll archive this webinar, and you can go back here and take a look at these flowers that are relatively easy for you to save seeds from.
So here at Heritage Farm, we're certainly focused on vegetables and on garden fruits, but we think that flowers are very much a part of everyone's garden, or they certainly should be. We've got several great advisors here, one of which, Rosalind Creasy, is always advocating for mixing flowers and herbs together rather than having a separate flower section and a separate vegetable section and a separate herb section, really mixing all those things together. They can convey some advantages. As you can see from this picture, it can be pretty striking, the results. So here we've got sweet potatoes and cabbage and amaranth. There's a type of kale in the background. But you can see also there's some coleus, there's some snapdragons around, there's a dwarf hollyhock, zabrina, there are dahlias, lots and lots of different things planted in this garden here. You can see these marigolds here planted next to this kale plant. That can convey some benefits as far as keeping insects away from your kale plant. Many flowers can attract beneficial insects as well. Bring them in and help pollinate your cucumbers or your melons or your watermelons, those sorts of things. many edible flowers as well. You can incorporate them into your desserts, like this cake. We had a 25-year anniversary for an employee here, and so we had 25 different types of edible flowers that we put on our cake as well. You can see some nasturtium and cornflower, zebrina, quite a few vegetable flowers are on there as well. So there are a few different ways in which these flowers produce seeds, and flowers exist to produce seeds. It's something we talk about in other presentations that we give. And there's a progression from flower to pod in many cases. So this is a picture of cleome here. And cleome is a really great example of this flower to pod to seed progression. You can see on one area of the plant just the flowers, these very open flowers with very visible reproductive organs. After those flowers get pollinated, they produce a pod, and that pod will dry out. It'll split open and it'll shatter seeds all over the garden. So if you have cleome, if you're growing cleome or spider flower, it's also called, it's a very visual transition from flower to pod to seeds. There are some flowers that do not have pods, many flowers that don't have pods. And instead of progressing to some sort of pod, they'll just progress directly to a seed head. So the flower will basically, the petals will fall apart, the seeds will be left there bare on the flower, be producing a seed head instead. So these are zinnias in this picture, and you can see a lot of the flowers have all dried back. They're getting very dry and brittle. You can see that orange one sort of in the center there, but many of the petals have disappeared and you're left with just a seed head. Echinacea does this as well. Black-eyed Susan, lots and lots of flowers progress just directly to the seed head without having a pod of any kind. There are lots of flowers that are what we would call compound flowers. So if you think of a sunflower, for example, it looks like one great big flower, and this is a photo of Tithonia here. They've got lots and lots of smaller flowers inside that central cluster there. So it looks like a single large flower, but they produce lots and lots of seeds. And this picture shows pretty clearly these individual flowers that will all be pollinated and will all produce seeds. And this is a picture of a sunflower sort of all dried out, and you can see all these different seeds there that are a result of different flowers. There are a few categories of flowers that we're going to talk about, and these are, again, as Toby mentioned, we had Ira Wallace here to speak over our summer conference, and we wanted to use some of her designations for these flowers as well. We have these pod bursters, so these would be things like sweet peas or touch-me-nots, things that as they dry out, and when they're totally dry, the pod splits open and the seeds will be dispersed all over the place. It's important to harvest these pods before the pods split open and break. So as soon as these pods start to dry out, you want to harvest them. Depending on what the plant is, with sweet peas it would be hard, but with other plants that are a little bit easier to handle, you could pull up the whole plant, stick it upside down in a paper bag, and let the plant dry out there. You want the seeds to stay attached to that plant as long as possible. You could pull the pods off early, but ideally you'd pull the plant or cut a piece of the plant off and then let the seeds and the pods dry out that way. There are also lots of flowers that would be considered seed spillers. So this is a picture of calendula. If anyone's grown calendula before, as that flower disappears and as that seed head starts to form and the seeds start to dry out, the flowers will sort of tip over and all the seeds will spill onto the ground. This is really visible in Nicotiana and in poppies as well. As soon as they're dry, the flowers will usually tip, or sometimes the petals will be gone and the seeds will just sort of start to fall out. So these aren't necessarily as explosive as the pod bursters are, but it's still important to get these maybe a little bit before the plant is totally dried out, and to pull up some of these flowers and to let them dry, and then to harvest the seeds from the flowers after that. Another category of plants are seed holders, and on the picture here is a marigold plant, one of these cygnet marigolds, and these will generally hold onto their seeds. I'm sure most of you have grown marigolds. The seeds don't really fall out. The flower head will disappear, and then you're left with a brown seed head with plenty of seeds inside. They don't tip over, they don't fall out very easily. So these seed holders are great candidates for just letting the flowers totally dry out on the plant. And then there are some flowers that have almost closed pod. These zinnias here don't actually have a pod, but they have very tight tough seed heads. Marigold, it's really easy just to pull the seeds out, but these closed pod or these really tightly bound seed heads, these need a little bit of work to crack these open. Zinnias are fairly straightforward. You can do it with your hands. Something like a hibiscus, on the other hand, is quite a bit more difficult to get the seeds out. You've got to really apply a lot of force to crack those pods open and to get those seeds. As I mentioned, there are these 4 different categories. For the first 2 categories, for seed spillers and for pod bursters, things that shatter, things that pretty regularly self-seed all over your garden, you want to collect those a little bit earlier, maybe while pods are just starting to dry out, or while they've dried about halfway. Or something like Nicotiana or even Cleome, something that has many, many different flowers that ripen and dry out at different times. As soon as the flowers on the bottom start to dry out, you could pick those plants up and then wait for the pods to dry out and then harvest the seeds from those. For the seed holders or for the closed pod flowers, you could just wait until they're totally dry in the plant and then harvest them. But you want to make sure that they stay on the plant as long as possible, whether or not you've pulled the plant and hung it upside down or pulled the plant and stuck it inside a bucket. You want to make sure that they're on that plant as long as possible, unless there's if you suspect that there might be some mold or if it's getting really damp and you can't dry out the whole plant, then it would be important to get the seeds out. This is a 4 o'clock. This is a 4 o'clock sort of in its flowering stage. This is a 4 o'clock in its dried out stage, and it's very brittle. And the seeds have also gotten very dark. So there are a couple ways you can tell if the seeds are ready for harvest. The pods or the plant should be very, very dry. And then the seeds will have generally changed color. A lot of seeds will turn black. You can see there's mostly 4 o'clock seeds, but it looks like there are some dill seeds that got mixed in with this. But waiting until the plant's very dry and the seeds will generally change color, but not in all cases. And then using a paper bag or some kind of container to hang these plants upside down, or to put the seeds inside. Toby's going to talk a little bit about seed drying, but you can dry lots and lots of seeds just inside a paper bag like this, particularly if they're really small. But something that allows air to flow through and something that keeps the light out. So when you have harvested your seeds, the next step would be to clean seeds. So we've got a bachelor button flower on the screen here. And this is kind of a mess of bachelor button seeds. We wanted to spend some time talking specifically about this one method of cleaning seeds because we've talked quite a bit in other presentations about threshing and about winnowing, but we want to talk specifically about seed screening here, which seems to be probably the most applicable to most of the flowers that folks are growing. The flower seeds are very light. If you tried to winnow them, they would just blow away, but we think screening is a really great way of separating the seeds from the chaff, which would be other pieces of the flower or dirt or other pieces of junk, but trying to get somewhat clean seeds that you can plant again next year and store over the winter. So we've got this kind of mess of bachelor button flowers and flower parts and seeds. This is another view here, kind of this mess. So we've just crushed up these flower heads, and you can see in the circle there is one of the seeds that we're looking for. They've got kind of a unique seed. They look like tiny little paintbrushes a little bit. So this is what we're after. We're after these little seeds in this mess of other chaff that's associated with these flowers. So here we've taken a screen. This is just a kitchen colander that we use here in the farmhouse, and we poured the chaff into this colander and shook it around a little bit. We got a lot of junk to fall through. You can see there's some immature seeds, some very, very small seeds. There's lots and lots of that feathery material. There's some other dried pieces of the flowers that were too small, and then we're left with some bigger stuff and plenty of seeds. So you can see the size of the screen here. The screen is not quite, it's small enough to prevent the seeds from falling through, but it also catches a lot of big stuff. So after we've gone through this process, we take another colander with a little bit bigger openings, and we'll pour that material through there, and you can see inside the colander there's still lots and lots of plant material there. There are big pieces of flower, there are bigger pieces of chaff there. And then on the plate you can see the seeds are pretty clean at this point, and this really only took 2 minutes. It was a very, very quick process. It is a bit of a trick to find the right size colander, that really fine sort of mesh colander that we used, and then this larger plastic colander work for lots and lots of different seeds, and they can get pretty clean seeds. So you can see in this picture here on the left hand side we have the really small stuff that was fell through that fine mesh colander, And then on the far right-hand side, you can see some bigger pieces of flowers there that were caught in that plastic colander. And then in the center, we've got pretty clean seed. You can see there's still some little junk in there. There are also some non-seed flower parts, but it's very, very clean seed, especially as a home gardener. You really don't need it much cleaner than this. If you were to set this out to dry and then store it and then plant it again next year, this would actually be really great. And for the time investment, for really just taking 2 minutes to put your seeds through a couple different size screens, you get very, very clean seed. And that's something to consider when you're sharing seeds as well. If you do want to send out a lot of seeds, it is kind of nice to have seeds that aren't mixed in with flowers and flower parts and other things. If you're just doing it at home, you maybe don't care about having these big flower head parts in it, or maybe having this tiny little chaff in it.
So after you have harvested and cleaned your seeds, the next step in the seed saving process is drying them. And this is a picture of tomato seeds actually, but you could do the same kind of thing with flower seeds, although they probably will not be soaking wet. You can put them on a coffee filter like we have here. You can put them on a paper plate, or like Grant was saying, you can put those pod bursters and seed spillers in a paper bag and dry them there. This process is going to take anywhere from a few days to a couple of weeks. The seeds should be drying in a pretty well ventilated place, maybe with a tiny bit of airflow that's between 75 and 90 degrees, hopefully not too humid. Be sure to label your seeds throughout this process. A lot of flower seeds look the same. Some of them, like the seeds Grant showed you, are very distinctive, but you just want to be sure that you have those seeds labeled, with the variety name and the harvest year, so that you can keep track of them. This is a picture of a couple pea seeds on the left and some squash seeds on the right. Obviously, these aren't tiny flower seeds, but it kind of gives you a good idea of seeds that are too wet, those seeds at the top that look malleable or you can squish with your fingers, and then seeds that are dry enough to store there on the bottom. The seeds on the bottom have been smashed with a hammer and they shatter, break in half. If you can shatter the seed, it would be dry enough to store. So once you've dried the seeds, then they're ready to store. Here we have some tomato seeds that have been packaged in small paper envelopes, and those paper envelopes have been put into a glass storage container. You can store these just in paper envelopes, you can store them just in glass or in other sealable containers. Again, be sure to label everything just so you don't get things mixed up. We had a question over here, and somebody asked how long seeds can be saved before they go bad. Ira Wallace and a few other folks recommend that flower seeds be saved or be used between 1 and 3 years after harvesting and saving them. So if you can get those back into the ground, that's the whole point of saving seeds in the first place. So keep these seeds in a cool, dry place, out of reach of pests or rodents. You wouldn't want mice to get into these, because that would be a really tasty thing for them to eat and your work would be lost. So the last step in this whole process is sharing seeds, and we always encourage folks to share seeds with their neighbors, with fellow gardeners, or even with us through the seed exchange or the yearbook. Thank you so much for paying attention to this webinar. It's been fun to meet all you folks and to do this for the first time. Thanks again.